Cartesian Theist made a video response to my video entitled "What a Tangled Web We Weave." Since my two YouTube channels have a combined 50,000 subs, I've seen a lot of response videos. Normally, I would not be making this video to respond to Cartesian Theist. His response is simply not worth it for reasons I'll explain momentarily. The only reason I'm responding is because I agreed to have a little YouTube debate with him, so I'm merely fulfilling my obligation in making this video, even though I actually want to debate with you about dualism, but I can understand your trepidation there. So I apologize to my subs for making this video, which might get a bit intricate and dull compared to my usual stuff. So let's get this out of the way. I'm going to treat you gently, Cartesian Theist, as your video wasn't as insulting as you are in the comment sections, but you're still going to be a little bit sore after this. Your first accusation is that I accused William Lane Craig of trying to present a deist God. I did no such thing. A deistic God is not obligated to be omniscient, omnipotent, or omnibenevolent. Therefore, I was merely stating that the way he presents the problem of evil as being inadequate is mainly inadequate for a deistic God, not Yahweh. Though the argument is far more adequate for Yahweh, it's not complete, but the full premises are ultimately necessary. I admit in my original video that the original problem of evil was successfully refuted, which you conveniently leave out, thereby making your subs think that I'm defending the problem of evil. A misunderstanding you exacerbate by titling your video "Dark Matter Fails on the Problem of Evil." The reason I took issue with Craig leaving out the premises in the problem of evil is because those premises are necessary for rebuttals to the free will defense, which is the usual rebuttal to the problem of evil, and the rebuttal that Craig himself uses. Yet your video completely ignores my three-pronged attack on Plantinga's free will defense. Your next point of contention was that Craig was making a summary of the problem of evil, and that we could safely assume the premises of omniscience, omnipotence, and omnibenevolence, because at the beginning of the lecture, Craig describes himself as a Christian theist, and that Christianity is the best hope of refuting the problem of evil. But you ended there. Later, Craig goes on to elaborate about the free will defense, which is why he thinks Christianity is the best hope. And it's why the main point of my video was a refutation of the free will defense. Again, we'd never know this by watching your video. Your assertion that Craig need only self-identify as a Christian in order to leave out key components of his opponent's arguments is absolutely ridiculous. Imagine if the situation were reversed. For example, I noticed that in your channel description that you mentioned Kalam as being a compelling argument for God. What if I treated the Kalam cosmological argument like Craig treated the problem of evil? It would go something like this. I am an atheist. I will be arguing that there is no sufficient evidence for a God's existence. One argument for God's existence is the Kalam cosmological argument. According to the Kalam argument, whatever begins to exist has a cause. Therefore, the God of classical theism exists. Is that adequate to you? I mean, I identified myself as an atheist, so it should satisfy you. I wasn't aware that straw manning is allowed as long as you identify what you are. You then go on to say that Craig did not need to include the premises of omnipotence, omniscience, and omnibenevolence when talking about the Christian God to an educated audience. Let's say for the moment that just because an audience is educated, that they would remember that these traits of the Abrahamic God are purported to be the reason evil should not exist. Let's grant that even though it's not an adequate excuse to leave out key components of an argument for purposes of summarization, especially when Craig reiterates the argument, thereby suggesting that indeed it was not a summarization, as a reiteration takes just as long as presenting the argument in full. So we're unjustifiably granting that Craig doesn't need to present the full argument to an educated audience. With that in mind, I ask you, where did you find Craig's video? Where? It must have been in a place where only educated theologians would watch it, right? Right? Well, no. You see, you asked me where to find the video, and I gave you a link to the video, which is on YouTube. So I guess that according to you, everyone who watches YouTube is an educated theologian. So Craig knows full well where his statements are going and what he's attempting to get away with. You then go on to say that Craig's conclusion is as correct as the conclusion one might draw from my presentation of the problem of evil, which is true, but I'm not defending the problem of evil. And the removal of the premises would mean that my rebuttal of the free will defense would not work. Since that was the whole purpose of my video, I had to establish the premises. Using Craig's deceitfulness to set the whole thing up wasn't really necessary, I admit that, but I wanted to expose him. You can understand that, right? After all, you said you wanted to expose me. You're not doing such a good job yet, though, are you? You then go on to state that the atheist philosopher J.L. Mackie presented the problem with omnipotence and omnibenevolence, but that he left out omniscience. And you ask if I would therefore accuse him of misrepresenting the argument. No. First, it is thought by some that omnipotence is synonymous with omniscience. If you can do anything, then you can know anything. Secondly, Mackie got 2 of the 3 premises included in my video. Craig got none. Mackie's presentation of the argument wouldn't have even registered as a problem with me. You then show that Mackie thinks there isn't a contradiction, and I agree. Ultimately, I therefore agree with Craig, true, but I vehemently disagree with his tactics, which was the whole point of that part of the video, especially seeing as how it makes my job more difficult to refute the free will defense. You then go on to state that Craig was not referring to the premises of omnipotence, omniscience, and omnibenevolence as being the missing premises. We would know that beyond the shadow of any doubt if Craig had mentioned them at all, wouldn't we? As it stands, all you can do is assume what Craig meant. And that's the problem with not being clear, isn't it? Or maybe it isn't really a problem at all for the theist. Perhaps obfuscation is the exact intent. After all, the video was not presented to an audience of educated theologians as you suggested. You failed to show why suspicion of obfuscation is unjustifiable. I therefore maintain my contention that the nature of the Abrahamic God is logically indefensible, and that Craig knows that the less specific he is about God, the easier it will be for him to defend it. For those of you who haven't seen my first video, here's a quick summation of my rebuttal to the free will defense. If God's morally sufficient reason for permitting the abundance of evil in the world is that he wants to freely draw people into heaven, then it would only be justifiable if at least more than half of the people in existence made it into heaven. Scripture makes it very clear that that won't happen. I know you are quite familiar with Matthew chapter 7, verses 13 and 14, which states that only a select few of people will make it into heaven. If God knows this, then he's allowing the sacrifice and suffering of the vast majority for the benefit of the few. That is not morally justifiable. The problem of evil was checked. The free will defense was a necessary escape, but in the end it was a setup for checkmate. The rebuttals to the free will defense, one of which is my own, are problematic for Christianity. Stop wasting my time with this petty gossip and get to the crux of the issue if you dare. You spent 10 minutes, the entirety of your video, defending William Lane Craig, whereas my video spent 9 minutes indicting Craig, providing historical background, describing Plantinga's free will defense, providing 2 well-known rebuttals to the free will defense, indicting Craig again on a separate issue, and then providing my own very strong rebuttal to the free will defense. I temporarily leave you with this bit of advice. The next time you want to goad someone into a fight, you better make damn sure that they're not actually the one goading you.